are the main drivers of this mass extinction that they're talking about? And can you simplify for us what sort of chain effects occur when a certain creature goes extinct?
We're told by 2020, in 3 years, that we will be missing 66% of all land wildlife. In the ocean, from 2000 to 2010, for a 10-year period, human beings poached and slaughtered 1 billion sharks. For most of the shark species, we're now missing 90% of sharks. They keep the oceans healthy by removing their prey that's sick and weak and old, and they prevent diseases from going global. We are destroying all life. This is a crisis of epic proportion. 44% last year of our honeybees in America didn't make it. It's the highest death rate we've ever seen. And the culprit is where their habitat is being destroyed, the chemicals on the land are killing them. If the bees die, we die because we can't have any food to eat.
Bees are actually gentle and beneficial, and we need to be nice to the bees because the bees are in trouble. There are a lot of people have heard in the news about colony collapse disorder, CCD, and this showed up in the mid-2000s where commercial beekeepers, several of them in the same year, discovered that their hives were perfectly healthy one day, and they came back for the next inspection a week later, and there weren't dead bees, there were no bees. That's what colony collapse disorder is, and disorder just means we don't really know what it is. And when they did tests inside those hives, they couldn't test any dead bees because there were no dead bees, but they found a multitude of diseases in those hives, more than we even knew existed. Bees are beneficial because they pollinate. That's actually the best product that they do for us. When we eat our food, a lot of that food is the result of an insect pollinating. And if a vegetable or a fruit didn't get pollinated, then we wouldn't have the fruit or the vegetable, or we'd have a fruit or the vegetable that's undeveloped or immature or just really not as much of it. So we can thank a bee for every third bite that we eat. Not only because of the food that they directly pollinate, but also because of the food that they pollinate that then indirectly helps feed other things that we eat, like livestock. We still have not found any single cause of colony collapse disorder. It's probably a combination of things, probably poor nutrition, lack of habitat. So we're, all the feral bees, the wild bees, they have no place to live anymore because we pave everything. We have these big, huge lawns that they can't live in. But the last piece of the puzzle is probably pesticides, and we tend to use pesticides more quickly than we need to, and we don't always use them correctly. And there's two different kinds of pesticides. A new pesticide that just came on the market and started being widely used around about the time colony collapse. So there are a number of beekeepers that suspect there's a correlation there. But this new class of pesticides are systemic. They're called neonicotinoids. And the neonicotinoids, they are taken up into the whole plant. So when a pest bug comes and chews on the plant, it will die because it gets the insecticide on that leaf, even though you didn't put the insecticide on that leaf. It's in the whole plant. So what this means for the bees is that the insecticide is actually in the nectar and pollen of the treated plant. Well, the bees will bring that back to their hive, the pollen and nectar, and they'll feed it to their young, and they'll eat it themselves. And what that does is continuously expose the entire colony to the pesticide. And this is true not only for honeybees, but also for all the native bees. What's going on right now is many independent research studies seem to indicate that this has several detrimental sublethal effects on the honeybees, as well as the native bees, things that would lead to their decline. If we want to help the bees, so a couple of things: provide habitat, provide food for them. Now the bees need to eat from spring all the way through fall. And if we have just one kind of flower, well, if we have no flowers in our yard, okay, there's nothing for them to eat. And give them a variety of plants, because the bees only get food from the plant when it's blooming. And last resort is chemicals and pesticides. There's a lot of manual things we can do that are less invasive, less destructive to the environment.
I think there's no question whatever that our government will stand by Gibraltar. 35 years ago this week, another woman Prime Minister sent a task force halfway across the world to defend the freedom of another small group of British people against another Spanish-speaking country. And I'm absolutely certain that our current Prime Minister will show the same resolve in standing by the people of Gibraltar.
I spent about 30 years looking into top political assassinations and false flag attacks, which I would call state-sponsored terrorism. A false flag is where it is the people that are there to defend us that is actually the ones doing these crimes to us, creating an outer enemy to scare us so that we will go into emotional, oh my God, I need to be saved, I need protection, and then accept their solution, which every single time is the same. More and more military police, more and more surveillance, more and more you having to give up your freedom, your liberties, all of that. And over the years, what I've come to see, in my humble opinion, is that we are looking at coordinated attacks in multiple countries, most of them, if not all, NATO countries or countries that have some kind of security agreement, like Canada, Australia, the US, with NATO, and so on. What keeps appearing in these operations that I keep bumping into is the CIA, Mossad, MI6 sometimes, and then whatever agency in that country, intelligence agency that is there. Very often, these agencies are totally connected at the top. To understand what's going on, you have to see it from a higher point of view, a higher level, where we are at the New World Order, where they see the world and the Western world as a chessboard, where the different countries are just like chess pieces.
Редко из западных СМИ накануне удержалась от соблазна обвинить сирийские войска, заодно и ВКС России, в трагедии в провинции Идлиб, где множество людей погибли, отравившись нервно-паралитическим газом. Характерная деталь – первыми на месте оказались печально известные белые каски, которые позировать перед камерами умеют куда лучше, чем спасать людей. Видимо, именно поговорив с ними, агентство Reuters поспешило обвинить в чудовищном зверстве Москву. Позже выяснилось, во-первых, российская авиация там в этот день не применялась, а во-вторых, боевое отравляющее вещество произвели сами боевики. Боевики, кстати, никогда не скрывали того факта, что они обладают навыками, техникой и достаточным количеством сырья для производства химического оружия.
As a criminal expert, you always look for motive. Why, in the midst of all of these battles, would Assad choose to attack civilians rather than military people? It's simply irrational. I defy anyone in the media to give me one good, sound reason why Syria would do this. You need to also look at who are the witnesses. The witnesses in this case are all terrorists, and all of them know either they tricked the Trump administration into changing its position, or they are going to lose the war. They are masters at staging deceptive operations. They've done it before, and they will do it whenever it will benefit their cause.
Donald Trump has been taken hostage by the deep state. And before we knew it, he's ending up being the tool of the deep state. How did this happen? How in 77 days is he doing something as stupid, as immoral, as short-sighted, as impulsive, as starting a major conflict with the Assad government and getting exactly into harm's way with Russia and all of its allies? What is he trying to accomplish? And the only thing that I can think of is that, and they've said it, Assad had to be punished. You know, the question comes to your mind, who appointed Donald Trump to be the global spanker-in-chief for any dictator or leader of a country that misbehaves? If there were some kind of existential threat, some horrible, immense, powerful, terminal threat to our existence, maybe that would be a justification for what we have. Instead of an existential threat, we have less of a threat than we've had since 1917, when Wilson foolishly put us into the First World War. And let's just tick off what is out there. The first one, obviously, is Russia. So how do they threaten the security or the safety of anybody in America unless you think Putin is foolish enough to risk nuclear retaliation by attacking us first? There's nothing that the Russians are going to do that remotely threatens us. China is the same thing, but they aren't a threat to us, and frankly, they're not a threat to any of their neighbors either, because they depend on a huge supply of raw materials coming up through the South China Sea into their ports. And frankly, we don't have to get that excited about the terrorism threat either. And if we wanted to do something about it, that's the third item, we ought to stop bombing and droning and occupying, because it's the blowback from that that's created what does exist today as a terrorist threat. So it leads to the system to keep itself alive leads to what I call endless false narratives, because if there isn't an enemy, if there isn't an imminent threat, then over time it becomes hard to justify all of this money that is being wasted in this massive system. I turned on cable news Thursday night, and you couldn't find anything from MSNBC to CNN to Fox that said anything different. They were all saying the same thing. They were in war heat. They're all paid by the same paymaster, which I call the warfare state, because there is a totally different view on what's going on in the world if you get your lens right, and if you're not part of this overwhelming groupthink consensus that is literally suffocating the machinery of government, the machinery of the mainstream media. Maybe there's a silver lining in this latest capture of Trump by the deep state, this utterly stupid attack on Syria, and that is maybe it will help revive a coalition, anti-war coalition in the Congress. So at least there's some glimmerings of hope, but frankly, the warfare state is suffocating Washington. The war machine is bankrupting and draining the fiscal and economic resources of America, and the hour is getting late.
The U.S. media is definitely beating the drumbeat of war. The U.S. media likes to only focus on the so-called North Korean threat. But a lot of what the Western media talks about in terms of North Korea is really based on distorted facts. I believe what is happening right now is that the U.S. is flexing its muscle in order to intimidate North Korea. We have been here before in the past. But by deploying aircraft carriers and strategic bombers to the region, what the United States is doing is it is creating a situation of tension where even the slightest misstep can create a confrontation that can quickly escalate into to full-scale war.
Schön und so friedlich miteinander leben. Glauben Sie mir, ich habe Enkel, ich habe Kinder. Ich möchte gerne, dass die Welt in Ruhe, dass wir Frieden haben, alle, egal welche Völker. Aber schade ist nur, dass so wenige Menschen sich darum kümmern. Es wird alles im Fernsehen geguckt, nur das, was wichtig ist, das wird nicht gesehen. Und das auch das, was wichtig ist, wird immer um diese Zeit im Fernsehen ausgestrahlt, wo die Menschen schlafen. Das arbeitende Volk noch, sage ich mal. Und das macht mich sehr, sehr traurig. kann Ihnen gar nicht sagen, wie schlimm es ist.
Figure out how to electronically stroke the ionosphere in just the right way, you could return a signal to the Earth that would affect the behavior of all of those in contact with that signal. And so when you think about HAARP as a device that could actually do this, that's where it actually caught my attention. It utilizes essentially what is called a frequency following response, or an FFR. And what this is where the brain of human beings will lock on to an external signal and begin to mirror, begin to follow it. And what that does is alter brain chemistry in kind of the sort of grossest way. It can just adjust or alter an emotional state, as an example, from, say, lethargic and passive to highly active and agitated, almost like flipping on and off a light switch. The ability to do this in a directed way on a large scale with HAARP is one thing. The other is to utilize any electromagnetic carrier, which includes television, radio, the internet, the power grid. Any of these things can be modulated in such a way as, again, to couple or connect to the human body and then drive physiological responses to those external signals. Just think about it as if you're a radio receiver. So if you know enough to sort of tune the human radio, if you will, by analogy, you can affect any physiological process. And this isn't theoretical anymore. This is science fact. This is the direction in which our military is going for two purposes. One is, they say, for communication with our own troops, and two is for disabling or degrading adversarial troops by being able to override essentially the operator, the human being themselves. If you can affect the operator in such a way, you can literally shut down warfare. But not just in warfare. The idea of utilizing these technologies in the civilian sector, this is where I have deep concerns, because the constraint of government is not such that they will constrain themselves in this regard. The temptation to use these technologies historically has been too great, and the abuses have been recorded in the record going back now over 50 years. There's over 500,000 Americans, just Americans alone, had been victims of human experiments ranging from the things we're talking about today to a number of other technologies that were tested. The fact is, these projects continue on. Unwitting victims are the only way you can really test these things in the field. And I would suggest that a lot of that testing happens overseas, outside of the boundaries of the United States. This is what will drive us in the wrong direction. Utilizing these techniques in combination with big data will change the way in which the world functions, and it will not be in favor of the average human being. The elites are worried because as we look at these very technologies designed to potentially enslave us, they are the very same underlying capacities that in fact can free us. The mind control experiments of the U.S. government yielded one very valuable piece of information. Each of us has within us a unique capability as created human beings, where the same potential that is synthesized by man in mind control technologies and the ability of human beings to do tremendous things with mental processes is being shown in biophysics labs around the world. We are more than we think, and the greatest threat to the elites is an awakened possibility free of fear. Because in fact, fear and worry inhibit your ability to reach the higher states of consciousness, the very thing we need in the planet today.
Que se está trabajando en esa línea, que se está trabajando en cómo controlar el cerebro. En noviembre del año pasado, sin ir más lejos, la Food and Drug Administration, el Departamento de Estados Unidos que regula precisamente todos estos aspectos sanitarios, autorizó por primera vez la producción a una sociedad americana de un chip cerebral que grababa y estimulaba el cerebro. Grabar el cerebro significa que te están grabando todas tus emociones, que saben no solamente eso, que pueden llegar a permitir prever cómo puedes actuar en el futuro.
Everything in our reality is a frequency. Everything. Thoughts are frequencies. Emotions are frequencies. And different emotions, whether it's joy or whether it's depression, are different frequencies. The human brain works in a certain frequency band and processes information in a certain frequency band. Therefore, if you can broadcast frequencies and information in those frequencies within the frequency band that the human mind interacts with reality, then you can completely scramble them or implant thoughts and perceptions that people think are their own. A violent protest, that is a frequency. People getting mass agitated, in mass states of fear. These are all frequencies. And if you can broadcast frequencies in a community or in an area, you can create mass hysteria, you can create mass fear. This is a story about what happened in 1991 in the war against Iraq. It describes a US psychological operation tactic directed against Iraqi troops in Kuwait. The US PSYOPs team set up its own portable FM transmitter and transmitted a sophisticated electronic system to speak directly to the mind of the listener, to alter and entrain his brainwaves, to manipulate his brain's EEG patterns and artificially implant negative emotional states, feelings of fear, anxiety, despair, and hopelessness. And this subliminal system doesn't, it says, just tell a person to feel an emotion. It makes them feel it. It implants that emotion in their minds, because they're broadcasting the frequency of that emotion, which gets the body to manifest that emotion. They broadcast this stuff to Iraqi troops, and what happened? There was a mass surrender of Iraqi troops. You can use these same techniques to program someone to carry out a terrorist attack. Over and over and over again, you see people involved, particularly in America, in mass shootings, which of course traumatize the population, among many other things, who are clearly under forms of mind control and were triggered to do it. When you look at the background evidence, are we so naive as to believe that's not being used on the general population to bring about reactions, responses, and behavior from the target population? Of course they are. And when you look, therefore, at this now gathering and fantastic already grid of transmitter towers, of Wi-Fi, of smart meters, these are frequencies being broadcast into the environment. People largely don't realize the scale of mind control to which the global human population is constantly subjected. We are at the crossroads here. We take our minds back, or someone else completely takes them over.
Without conscious thought, there's no ability to reason, to question, to consciously comprehend, to critically analyze, to apply any knowledge, which is why mind control is used on the U.S. military, because it gives them superhuman capabilities. It also allows for superhuman traits like 44 times visual acuity, because when there's no conscious thought, it's as though the subconscious mind will develop heightened senses in other directions to make up for it. It's the same way a blind person has acute hearing. You know, the brain will make up for it. So with 44 times visual acuity, the soldiers would be able to just point and shoot with pinpoint accuracy. Not only that, but they didn't have that moment of critical analysis, that conscious thought, that moment of compassion, that moment that says that human knowing that we shouldn't be just killing other people.
Right.
I mean, that's not, it's against human nature to do that. So the conscious mind is bypassed, programming is put in place, visual acuity is heightened, physical endurance is heightened. And then when our military comes home, they don't have that ability to consciously reason through what just happened to them because it's compartmentalized knowledge. When Kennedy was assassinated, most people know where they were and what they were doing at that time. And for those who are younger, they know where they were and what they were doing when 9/11 happened. And because that's a trauma, and that traumatized the whole nation. When that trauma occurs, that is a basis for mind control, because it's how our brains respond to trauma. When trauma occurs, it's as though our conscious mind takes flight, or it goes on hold, and the subconscious mind is wide open to be easily led. And that subconscious manipulation is done through using NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It's the language of the subconscious mind. It's used by all politicians. It's used by advertisers. It's used in global education. It's just a natural part of things. When we understand how our brains respond to trauma, when we understand what NLP is and how it works, then we can easily, peacefully reclaim control over our own minds and lives again.
Why would the government try to hide the reality of UFOs as they have for decades? They understood we have off-world visitors coming here, using this high technology energy. We can imagine why they might lie about it. It's technological advantage, military applications. But what are some of the other reasons that you see for this?
Social and political control. I mean, it's political control 101. Information control. Those who control the information flow have their hand on the lever of power. Why do these aliens go skulking around the shadows? Most of them, the evidence suggests they've cut deals. Why do any espionage agents go skulking about in the shadows? Because they're wheeling and dealing in secret. That's espionage 101. Control of information, control of personnel, control of institutional or organizational assets. You keep a tight lid on it, and that's your answer right there. When you're dealing with other species coming from other planets, or even from another space-time continuum altogether, maybe from another dimension, or another realm where the laws of physics has developed, and then you encounter that species in their technology and their culture and their mode of thought, their way of reasoning, their way of communicating. It could literally be mind-bending, could be very difficult to integrate psychologically and mentally. I think that they do have operational so-called UFO technology, but it's being used, they being the military agencies. And I believe they've made a lot of progress in the last half century, and they've kept the vast majority of it classified. When you start working with these technologies that bend time, if you will, and or bend space, if you will, the reality veils start to part. The veils of reality between dimensions, the veils of reality between different modes of perception, the veils of reality may be between literally other physical universes. And I think what happens is that you mentally and also optically, physically, begin to perceive quite a lot of things that the ordinary person doesn't in the course of their everyday life. There are thousands and thousands, unknown thousands of cases of so-called aliens or extraterrestrials, very much, so to speak, manifesting themselves to ordinary people. You see, they're different groups. And the ones who've cut deals with the major governments, for example, and military and espionage agencies, do have a hierarchical command or organizational structure. But the evidence suggests there are other groups for whom that means nothing. And so they, therefore, to them to talk to the president is meaningless. For them, they would say, who is this guy? He's corrupt, he's incompetent, he's dishonest, he's not very intelligent, so why would I waste my time? And the answer they would immediately have is, I wouldn't waste my time. So I'll look for someone who is honest, intellectually curious, who's competent, and then that might turn out to be a 15-year-old girl in China. They would appear to her, and she might be out working in a rice field, right? But for them, she might be 1,000 times more interesting to them than a pathological liar such as Barack Obama. They might regard him as a criminally insane doofus. When aliens come, and I'm not talking about the malevolent ones with a militaristic conquest and exploitation mentality, but the other ones with a higher level of spiritual realization, when they come, the people who will interest them will be people who are advanced as human beings. They wouldn't have the slightest interest in talking to a Henry Kissinger or a George Soros, or a Bill Gates, or a Angela Merkel. There are ET beings and races who are very technically clever, but also have an advanced consciousness, very advanced consciousness, almost godlike in some respects. There are other ETs that are very technically clever, but they have a very low level of consciousness. And both of them, the evidence suggests that both types are here on Earth. I know it's essential to explore and advance consciousness. That is the purpose of a human being, to be conscious, to explore consciousness.
should be true love. And if it is true love, it can bring a lot of happiness to you and to Mother Earth. And romantic love, if it is true love, it can also bring a lot of happiness. But if it is not true love, it will make you suffer and make the others suffer as well. True love needs 4 elements. First of all, Maitri, loving kindness, that is the capacity to offer happiness. If you cannot offer happiness, that's not true love. In romantic love, if you are not able to help the other person happy, that's not true love. So you should train yourself in order to be able to offer happiness to you and to him or to her. The second element of true love is compassion. Compassion is the kind of energy that can help remove suffering, that can help transform the suffering in you and in the other person. If you cannot transform and take care of the suffering in you and in another person, that is not true love. That is why karuna, the second element of true love, should be cultivated by you and by the other person. Romantic and not romantic, that's not important. The important is it is true love and not true love. And the third element of true love is joy. If you make the other person cry all the time and you cry all the time, that's not true love. True love is inclusiveness, that you do not exclude. His suffering is your suffering. His happiness is your happiness. There is no individual suffering and happiness anymore. In true love, there is the element of inclusiveness, non-discrimination. There is no separation. There is no frontier between you and the other person. In that spirit, you cannot say, that's your problem. No, your problem is my problem. My suffering is your suffering. And if romantic love has these 4 elements, it can bring a lot of happiness also. If you are successful, you will cultivate a lot of loving kindness and compassion. And very soon, your love will be all-embracing. The other person is no longer the only object of your love, because your love continues to grow and your love will embrace all of us, and happiness becomes limitless. If it is true love, and then it will continue to grow and include more and more and more, not only humans, but also animals, vegetables, and minerals. And that is great love, Maha Karuna, Maha Maitri.